What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com, your home for the 2020 World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers. My name is Jeff Spiegel, joined as always by Daniel Starkand. We are 3 games into the second half of the season. Daniel, the Dodgers are just 1 game back. They got a 4-game set against the Giants at home starting tonight. How are you feeling about things now that we've got a couple games under our belt after the All-Star break?
I'm feeling good. I'd be feeling a lot better if I had my little buddy, the old Broom, here next to me. But unfortunately, we couldn't pull it out yesterday. Another tough extra inning loss, which is basically every time the Dodgers play in extra innings. So things could be better, but you'll take 2 out of 3 at Coors Field. And like you said, got a big series coming up against the Giants. So this is a big week ahead right here. I feel like the Dodgers have been right there, but haven't quite been able to take over, first place. Like they've had opportunities, but haven't been able to capitalize. So, this should be a big week.
Absolutely. Well, here's the plan for today. We're going to do the big part of today is a full trade primer. We're going to break through. I think I've got 13 names, starting pitchers and relief pitchers only. We're going to sort of operate under the assumption that offensively the Dodgers aren't going to make a big splash. There's just not anywhere to put those guys. So full trade primer on starters and relievers who might be available. We'll preview the series with the Giants. We're going to talk Cody Bellinger here in just a little bit because I think that's an important storyline of how big his struggles have been. But let's start real quick on that Colorado series. As you mentioned it, the Dodgers take 2 out of 3. They lose the third one 6-5 in extra innings. Jansen blows the save. My guy Bickford comes in with a runner on second. Fly ball, tie game. Charlie Blackmon home run, game over. The Dodgers are now 1-9 in extra inning games. Is this fluky? Is there something about the way the Dodgers are constructed, the way that they play, that this runner at second base thing just doesn't work for them? Like, what have you seen from the Dodgers that makes you understand or helps you understand this 1-9 record?
I mean, I think it's kind of a combination of both. A little fluky, a little the Dodgers just not playing good baseball. I mean, we've talked about it at length. I feel like the Dodgers is, their inability to hold runners on, their inability to steal bases themselves. Sometimes it's clutch hitting, like whatever the case may be. It's just in extra innings, it all comes down to execution. Like you said, you get a free runner on second base. You need to make sure you score that guy, first of all, which the Dodgers did, to their credit, but they weren't able to add on after that. And I mean, Bickford's been great all year, but I guess, yesterday just wasn't his day. I can't really fault him for the 2 fly balls there to tie the game. I mean, that's not much you could do about that. He's getting outs there, but then Blackmon hits the walk-off home run. Just unfortunate. I'd say yesterday was just kind of more, luck, fluky, whatever. Like, I don't think the Dodgers necessarily did anything wrong. It's just sometimes, things happen. It's extra innings. So, 1-9 is definitely not great. I think it also reflects kind of the Dodgers' overall record in 1-run games.
Yeah.
So we've been saying all year they need to be better in those situations. We say we think it's going to turn. I still think at some point it will, but it hasn't happened yet, and it definitely didn't happen yesterday. So it is what it is. If you want to, if you look at their overall record, it's still great, but you can't help but think how much better it would be if they could just be better in those type of games.
Yeah, one other thing I want to say about yesterday is shame on you to all the people who question Albert Pujols' ability to score from second on a single, okay? I mean, didn't even have to slide at home plate. You could tell that the center fielder was a little worried about his speed, rushed the throw a little bit, came up the first base line, but shout out to Pujols for getting on his horse there with the Will Smith RBI singles. Good stuff there. The other key update from the weekend before we move on is Mookie Betts. Obviously, he leaves the game. Panic ensues, as it should. Mookie Betts has been on a tear of late. The good news is he is okay. He was out yesterday. Dave Roberts expects him back in the lineup tonight. The tear he's been on, I mean, the last 4 games, he is 12 for 16 with 4 walks. So he is he has an on-base percentage of 800 for the last 4. He also has 4 doubles and 3 home runs. We talked in the live show on Friday. Could have been 5 doubles if Urias wasn't ahead of him on the base pass on one of those. He scored 12 runs. So he's averaging 3 runs per game. He's averaging 2 extra base hits per game with an on-base percentage of 800 all the while. Unbelievable stuff from Mookie. So good news that he's healthy. We know he was sort of maintaining a couple things, trying to take care of a couple things by sitting out the All-Star break. Are you worried that this has flared up just 2 games into the second half, even after 4 or 5 days off?
I mean, it's a little worrisome. It's definitely something they're going to have to manage because right now it's not a huge deal, but you don't want it to turn into a
Yeah.
big deal. We're in the second half of the season now, so you can't really afford to lose, key guys to injuries, especially given how close the division race is. So I'll say I'm not super worried, just because, like you said, Dave Roberts said the expectation is he'll be back in the lineup today, but it's definitely something you have to manage. I feel like Mookie's been dealing with different minor type of injuries kind of all season,
Yeah.
which is why he was having a subpar season for a lot of the year. Like you said, he's absolutely on fire now. So I guess this injury, came at an unfortunate time. They definitely could have used him at the top of the lineup
Yeah.
yesterday. But as long as he's back today and picking up where he left off, then I'm not worried. But I definitely think you got to manage him, give him a day off here and there, because ultimately, you want everyone as healthy and as fresh as possible for the stretch run in the postseason.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's unfortunate that it crops up as quickly as it did, but it's also good news that it sort of goes away as quickly as it did, and that they're
Yeah.
expecting him back. They're going to be cautious. So if there was any concern at all, they would be quick to put him on the injured list, I would think, but they're not doing that. So I think that's good news for Dodger fans as far as expectations for Mookie Betts. A guy on the opposite end of the spectrum for Mookie Betts is the guy who plays next to him in the outfield. That's Cody Bellinger. And I knew the numbers were bad, Daniel. When I looked at them, they're worse than I expected. This
Yeah.
season, he's currently slashing 168 batting average, 284 on base percentage, 282 slugging percentage. So a slugging percentage worse than an on base percentage. Dating back to June 28th, he is 5 for his last 58. So well under 100 batting average. He has just one extra base hit over that stretch. That was the home run in the 22-1 game. He has 6 walks and 20 strikeouts. He's been back almost a month, so we're not talking about, oh, he just got injured, he's working his way back. He's been back for almost a month. I looked at his StatCast stuff. His exit velocity, his barrel percentage, his expected batting average, expected slugging, hard hit, strikeout percentage, all career lows. If you compare those numbers, career worst, I should say. His strikeout percentage this year is 27%. The last 2 years, it was around 17%. His hard hit percentage is 29%. That's down from 43% over the last 2 years. He's faced 644 pitches this year. He has barreled the ball 7 times out of 604. Those are pitches, so not every one he swings at. His chase rate is a career high 29%, and then his whiff rate is 31%, up from 23. If you break that down even further, he's whiffing on 32% of fastballs. That's up from 26% last year, 21% in 2019. On sliders, he's whiffing on 44% of sliders thrown at him, which, I mean, you've seen. Do you throw the slider at his ankles? He's going to swing at the ball in the dirt, it feels like, every time. 44% of the time he's whiffing. That's up from 31% and 29% the last 2 years. So all that is really, really bad. He's swinging and missing a ton. He's not hitting the ball hard when he does hit it hard. He's striking out at a high rate. His expected numbers are not good. His exit velocity is not good. What do you mean? I mean, and he's been back a month. Like, I mean, I know we've seen the high points, but I don't know. I guess I'm speechless on what to say here, because I'm not seeing anything in the games where it's like Dave Roberts always wants to talk about quality of at bat. I mean, he says that a lot. Like, I'm watching the games. I don't see quality at bats being put together by Cody Bellinger. I see terrible swings. I see swings that aren't even close to the ball, and when he makes contact, it's typically not good. Tends to look like he's just swinging for the fences, and that's about it. What do you make of Cody Bellinger, and how concerned are you with what you've seen of him over the last month or so?
Yeah, I mean, you just laid out all the numbers there. It's obviously not great. You keep waiting for him to
Yeah.
to get out of it, just because we know the talent is there, and it hasn't happened to this point. I actually liked what Dave Roberts did yesterday, with Mookie out, to try to kickstart Cody a little bit. He puts him in the leadoff spot. They're facing John Gray, who's a pitcher that Cody has had a lot of success against in the past. But even that didn't work.
0
You
for
know, he
4, I
still went
believe.
0 for 4. Yeah, 0 for he walked once, I think. But yeah, it still went 0 for 4. So, I'm not really sure what to make of it. I think Dave Roberts had a comment after the game yesterday, and it's kind of something similar to what I've been talking about. I want to like start seeing him trying to do other things instead of just swinging for the fences every time. Like
Yeah.
when in 2019, when he had his MVP season, like yes, he hit a lot of home runs, but he was also getting his hits. He was going the other way. He was hitting line drives. He was moving runners over, when the situation calls for it. Like he was doing all the little things right that he's just not
Yeah.
doing right now. Like, and he's not doing the big things right either. Like it's not like he's he's batting 200, but he's still got, 10 home runs or something.
Right.
Like, no, it's not, he's not even doing that. So, yeah, he's just struggling. There's still a lot of season left. And like we talked about, I think it was on the live show the other night, like this lineup is so deep that they don't really need him to be like the MVP Cody Bellinger. They just need him to contribute some, which he hasn't even been able to do. So, it's definitely a little worrisome. I still maintain that at some point in the next 70 games or whatever, he'll figure at least something out. He'll have a hot streak somewhere in there. I don't think he's going to end the season with the current numbers he has, which would make him probably the worst hitter in the league
Yeah.
if I had to guess. I don't have the numbers, but he hasn't been great. So
Yeah.
I don't know what else to say at this point. You just hope he figures it out at some point.
I mean, look, we've seen like the DJ Peters experience at the major league level.
Yeah.
Like, it's hard to say what you're looking at when you watch Cody Bellinger offensively is a whole lot different. Obviously, we know he has the potential, we know he has the track record, but when we watch Peters, it's like this guy just looks overmatched. He looks out of like Bellinger at times has looked overmatched. I think that's the part that's worrisome. Now, I'll say this right up front, like Cody Bellinger's not getting optioned to the minor leagues. Like, nothing is happening with Cody Bellinger other than him trying to figure this out. Defensively, he's still elite. He still provides a ton of value for you defensively. And as you said, the Dodgers don't need all these guys to contribute at the highest level, especially with Corey Seager, hopefully expected back at some point this week. I'm curious. I mean, is there a chance that there's sort of like a phantom injured list trip that happens somewhere where it's like, hey, go take 10 days, clear your mind, maybe play in some simulated games or something like that just to get his swing right? Or do you think the Dodgers just put him in the lineup every single day and ride this out?
I mean, the thing is, he's had so much time off this year that I don't think more time off is what he needs. Like, I think as unfortunate as it is, like he probably needs as many at bats as possible to get out of it. And like, I don't know if the Dodgers could keep penciling him in there at this rate. I think they will. Like you said, at the end of the day, it's still Cody Bellinger. He's not going to go down to the minors or anything. But yeah, I don't exactly know what he needs. If I had to guess, I'd say even more at bats,
Okay.
maybe do some simulated games, just get him looking at different things, seeing different pitches, because you said the numbers, he's he can't hit a breaking ball right now. He's swinging at fastballs high above the zone. And we've seen in the postseason or whatever, like if you want to get Cody Bellinger out, that's the way to do it. It's fastballs up and in, and then it's, breaking balls low. So I think in 2019, he kind of figured that out and was laying off a lot of those pitches that were out of the zone and just kind of looking for his pitch. He definitely needs to get back to that. And I'm not exactly sure how it's going to happen, but I still remain, fairly confident that at some point he's going to figure something out at least and not be this bad.
And I would say on the season, his walk rate isn't terrible. It's pretty much around his career average. Obviously only 6 walks dating in his, last 64-ish plate appearances. So that's not a great number, but that's the thing I feel like that has changed over the last month is that he was at least at one point walking at a fairly reasonable rate to offset all this, but it does feel like even that has gone away over the last month. So we'll see. I mean, yeah, we know the talent is there, and it's not like he's only done it for a small extent, like stretch. It's not like one of these guys where it's like, man, was that 90-game stretch he went on 2 years ago like a fluke? It's like we've seen him do this in 2017. We saw him do it in 2019. Unfortunately, the even number years have not been as kind to him. We had hoped that this year would be a bounce back. Last year's weird, blah, blah. You can make tons of excuses, but he's a fascinating player because on one hand, you have a lot of track record to say, we've seen this guy play at an MVP level for 2 entire Major League Baseball seasons. We've seen him hit at a high level in the postseason, etc. But you also have a lot of Major League time where he has not been at that level. So he's such a fascinating guy. And I mean, if we're being perfectly honest, Corey Seager kind of dealt with the same type of thing where the highs, we knew what they were and they were sustained and they were expected. And yet there were also lows where it was just struggle. And his had more to do with injury. There was something about Seager's approach, though, that always felt consistent. It always felt like when he got up there, he wasn't in his head. He wasn't tweaking things. It was just like, whatever. Like, you just felt like he would swing his way out of it. There's something about Bellinger that I don't know how to put my finger on it, but I worry about how this thing plays out. Again, I don't think he's going to be a terrible Major League Baseball player. I don't think he's going to hit 168 for the whole season. I think that average definitively gets above 200 at some point this year. But does it get up to like 250? Like, can he raise it that much? Or does it hover around 205, 210, and he ends up with like 12 home runs on the season? It's weird for me to say, but I don't know. I mean, if you had to guess, Daniel, if I gave you, option one is I don't even know what his home run number is right now, but let's say
I think he's got like 4 or 5, I
okay,
want to
and
say.
we've got 70 games left in the season, roughly. So let's say like if you had to guess over the next 70 games, would you be more confident in saying that he hits, let's say, 11 home runs with a batting average of around 260, or if he hits 6 home runs with a batting average around 210? Which of those, if you had to pick one of those two, which would you say is more likely?
I'd say the better version.
Okay.
Even though that's obviously a lot better than what he's doing right now, like that's still not
No,
great by any means. Like that's not asking too much. You're 260, 11 homers. That's still like not
25.
very
It's like
good
25 home
for
run pace. So we're not talking
yeah,
about like
that's
40
still
home run
yeah,
pace.
exactly. Exactly. So I think he could get to that level. He's what we've seen is he's very streaky. Like he's either ice hot or I mean like really hot or ice cold.
Yeah.
It's one of the two. It's not really in between. So if he gets hot at some point, I think he could get those numbers up. And honestly, like the numbers themselves like aren't really as important as much as just kind of how he
Yeah.
feels. You mentioned how Corey Seager's never really tinkering with anything at the plate. Like his stance is the same, his swing's always the same. Like Cody's kind of the
Yeah.
opposite of that. Like he's always tinkering with stuff. So if he could just kind of get figured out where he wants to be, how he wants to set up, then I think that'll go a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, let's shift gears from the Bellinger conversation. Let's talk trade. Here we're recording on July 19th. We're under 2 weeks away from the trade deadline. August 1st, I believe, is the trade deadline in Major League Baseball. Lots of options here for the Dodgers and lots of moves to make. And so I mentioned this at the beginning. I've got a list of pitchers, starters, and relievers here. I didn't put hitters on this list, and that's partially because we're talking about a moment where Corey Seager is imminently due back to the Dodgers lineup. When he joins, you figure you pencil him into shortstop. You've got Mookie in right field, Cody Bellinger in center field. A.J. Pollock has been really good in left field. Now, there's probably a platoon there. You've got Chris Taylor at second base, Muncy at first, Turner at third, Smith at catcher. That leaves you Zach McKinstry and Gavin Lux, Albert Pujols, Austin Barnes, maybe Matt Beatty. So there's not a ton of room for, Chris Bryant is a guy that I've mentioned. I think A.J. Pollock's emergence makes that less necessary because I think Chris Bryant can fill a lot of holes. There's options there. But do you agree with the sense that like finding a hitter is third on the priority list between starting, relieving, and hitting? And if you do, would you even have it on the list of things you're engaging in conversations with?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And you got to consider like it's not like the Dodgers have unlimited resources here.
Yeah.
Like they have a good farm system, but it's not necessarily what it used to be where they just got all these top prospects ready to go and you could trade as many as you want or keep as many as you want. Like I'd say I'm not expecting more than one, big deal, if that even. So if you're going to use your resources to improve the club, might as well do it where your weaknesses are, and that's in the rotation. And then next would be in the bullpen, I would say, and like you said, hitting would be a far distant third.
Yeah.
So if you have limited resources, might as well use them where you need them.
Yeah. Well, I've got an insane trade that I've been hyping up to you that I'm going to save for the end of this segment on trade stuff. So just get ready. Daniel asked me if I would share it with him off the air. I said, no, you got to deal with this on live stuff. So here we go. So one thing I wanted to do, I was texting with Justin Lorber ahead of this just to get a sense of the state of the Dodgers farm system and what he thinks. And I said, hey, are there any guys untouchable? In my mind, I'm like, maybe Josiah Gray's untouchable. And he kind of said, there's an upper tier of 9 guys. That's Josiah Gray, Keibert Ruiz, Michael Busch, Andy Pages, Ryan Pepio, Bobby Miller, Diego Cartaya, Wilman Diaz, and Miguel Vargas. Those 9 are the top Dodger prospects. So he said those 9 are, if there were going to be an untouchable list, it would be them. But he said, which was interesting to me, I wouldn't be surprised if they moved any of them, maybe aside from Bobby Miller. So Bobby Miller, a draft pick from a year ago, who's been really, really good. Like potentially future number 1, number 2 starter good. So that was interesting to me that he said, hey, I think some of these guys might be on the table. And that's important to know because some of the names I'm going to mention here in a moment probably would require dipping into that. So at the starter level, I'm going to give you 4 different categories. Category 1 is if you want to go win a World Series. Category 2 is if I'm looking for quality over quantity. Category 3 is just give me guys that are going to give me 5 to 6 innings pitched every 5 days at a league average level. And category 4 is a guy that I was sneaky surprised by that I like. So this is going to be my sleeper trade prospect for the year. And then we'll do relievers after that. So we'll talk about the obvious one. This is the first guy on everybody's list. If you want to go win a World Series, the guy you make a phone call about is Max Scherzer. Max Scherzer is 36 years old. He's due to be a free agent at the end of the season. He has suggested, whether he would actually go through with this, that he would not accept a trade anywhere unless there was an agreed upon extension included in that trade. The Nationals are currently 6 games back in the division. They're 6 games under 500. They're 10 games back of the wild card. The nice thing about wanting to trade in the National League is nobody's making the wild card because of the NL West. Like the Padres, Dodgers, and Giants, you can pencil 2 of those teams into the wild card. Everybody else is playing for their division. That's going to help the Dodgers in a situation like the Nationals. Scherzer, 2.83 ERA, striking about 12 guys per 9, 2 walks per 9. His ERA hasn't been above 3.15 since 2012, aside from last year. As I said, he's 36 years old. The cost is probably high here. I was talking to Justin about this, and he said, the structure is probably similar to the Yu Darvish trade. The Dodgers in that one, they sent number 4 prospect Willie Calhoun, their number 17 prospect and number 27 prospect. Justin kind of said probably the same framework. You're looking at one of those top 9 guys and then an upgraded version of the number 17 prospect. So, when you're looking at, and so it's like one of Gray, Ruiz, Bush, Pages, Pepio, Miller, Cartaya, Diaz, and Vargas. One of those, and then plus like an Andre Jackson type. So that's the go win a World Series. So I'll throw a trade proposal at you. Maybe the Dodgers would you be interested in? I know you're interested in Max Scherzer, obviously.
Yeah.
If the trade required, let's say the trade required like Diego Cartaya and Andre Jackson. If that was the cost, Cartaya, 19 years old, huge catching prospect, low levels of the minors. You've got Keibert Ruiz ahead of him. You've got Will Smith ahead of him. If that was the trade, what would you think about that for Max Scherzer?
I definitely think you have to consider that. I know Diego Cartaya is a big time prospect. They're talking about. They say some prospect experts think might be the best of the Dodgers catchers, and that includes Will Smith and Keibert Ruiz. But also at the end of the day, even if you trade Cartaya, you still have Will Smith and Keibert Ruiz, who we already have seen what Will Smith is capable of. And Keibert Ruiz at the AAA level is just unreal this year.
Yeah.
And he could be major league ready as soon as next year, and you're going to have those guys under club control for 5-6 years or whatever.
There's also 2 catching prospects behind them. A guy they took, I think, in the 4th round last year, and then they had like the number 1 international signing, Jesus Galiz, I believe is his name, is like a 16 or 17-year-old catcher. So the catching depth is not a concern in the Dodger system.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. So when you look at the Dodgers farm system, I'd say the one area that they're really deep at is catchers. So if you're gonna do a big deal, then I'd guess that there's probably gonna be some catcher involved in that, because at the end of the day, there's only one catcher in the major leagues, 2 on the roster, obviously. But you don't have room for all these guys at the end of the day. So I definitely think that's something you got to consider. You mentioned the extension stuff with Scherzer. I think that definitely gets pretty interesting.
Yeah.
If you're extending Scherzer, he's obviously going to want to get paid a lot. It's probably not going to be long-term money, probably like a 2-year deal, $25 million a year, somewhere in that range. When you look at the other free agents the Dodgers have, you gotta think that you're probably going to start losing some of those guys if you're giving all that money to Scherzer. The Dodgers have Kershaw, Seager, Chris Taylor, Kenley Jansen. All those guys are free agents. So are you willing to lose Clayton Kershaw if it means Max Scherzer coming in, and you could get a World Series this year with both of them, perhaps? But then after that, you're gonna have to make some tough decisions. I definitely think it's something to consider. It's at the end of the day, it is Max Scherzer. He's right there with Kershaw as the 2 best pitchers of this generation. Yep. He's getting up there in age, but we see he's still having a really good year this year. So I definitely think it's something to consider. I'd have to know more about the extension stuff before I fully say yes, but it's intriguing. We'll see if he's even dealt, but it's definitely intriguing.
Let me ask you this. Is he more valuable to you as a 1-year rental? Like, if you could choose, hey, you can either have Scherzer as a 1-year rental, or you have to sign him to a 2-year, $60 million extension. Like, which of those 2 would you be willing to give up more for? Knowing we have the guy for this year plus 2 more, but we have to pay him? Or, hey, we get the guy, but we don't have to commit long term. Which of those is more interesting to you?
I think you'd be giving up more to get him long term, I'd
Yeah.
say, even if you're paying him that money. Because I mean, a rental is just a rental. You get him for 3 months or whatever. It's not affecting your long term outlook, but you have him for this year. Those guys typically cost less when it comes to prospects. When you look at Darvish for example, I mean that was a good return the Rangers got, but it's not the Darvish return you're getting if he still had 3 years left or
Yeah.
whatever. He was just a rental for the Dodgers, and also the Manny Machado trade, it was the same deal. Like the Dodgers gave up a couple decent guys. I don't think any of them have really panned out, but that's not what the return from a prime Manny Machado would be if you have years of control. So I think it would be cheaper for a rental, which I think I'd be more interested in that because you're giving up less and also you don't have to commit to him long term necessarily. And you still have the option to re-sign him. Obviously,
Yeah.
like let's say if there's no extension agreed upon, he would just become a free agent. And if he likes it here, if you guys win a World Series, that's definitely an option of bringing him back. I just like having that option as opposed to trading him and extending him right away, and then you're just losing those options. I just mentioned how many guys are free agents. You're going to be losing some of those guys for Max Scherzer, who's great, but he's also 36 or
36.
37 years old, whatever he is. Who knows how many
Yeah.
good to elite years he has left at this
Yeah,
point.
and the elephant in the room in this whole conversation is Trevor Bauer. And again,
Yeah.
you and I are not expecting him to pitch for the Dodgers again. He has had his stay extended to, I believe, July 27th, which gives them time to go through the hearing that he has on July 23rd. Obviously, the other piece of that is I have no idea what the financial ramifications of all of that. Do the Dodgers just have to eat the money and it just sits on their books, that the $45 million that he's due next year or whatever, or do they somehow get out of that? So the wait and extend on Scherzer would give you some opportunities there. So I'll quickly put you on the spot. Cartaya and Andre Jackson for Max Scherzer, no extension, yes or no? Today.
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. Next category for me is the quality over quantity. There's two guys in this category. One's 27, one's 28. These are guys who both have a little bit of team control left. It's funny because I actually think the cost here on both of these guys is probably similar to Scherzer, simply because you're getting more years. In one case, 2 years, or a year and a half, in the other 2.5. But also because you're getting guys where the cost is going to be well below market value. The first is Jose Berrios of the Twins. Just turned 27. He's under contract through next year. He's a guy that's averaging 6 innings per start, 3.5 ERA. Hasn't really missed any starts dating back to 2017. Has had an ERA under 4.0 every year for the past 5 years. Holy smokes. Past 5 years. I do talk for a living. StatCast stuff isn't amazing. He's kind of league average to above average on StatCast. That's number one, Berrios. Option number two is Luis Castillo of the Reds, 28 years old. He's got 2 more years of arbitration left after this year. 4.39 ERA this year, 3.92 FIP. His strikeouts per 9 is down from 11-ish to 8.6. His walk rate is a career high. Last 2 seasons, though, 3.4, 3.21 ERA. Reds are 5.5 game back in the wild card, 7 games back in the division. StatCast stuff, league average. Last year, his numbers have been way better the last 2 years, I would say, and also the last 2 months. So in June and July, he's got a 1.75 ERA over his last 56 innings pitched, a whip just over 1. So Luis Castillo, Jose Berrios, what do you think of those two names? And again, I'm not an expert on trying to predict package value, that kind of thing. But I would guess that the difference between trading for one of these guys who are really good, number 2, number 3 type starters, young, under team control for a year and a half or 2.5 years, I'm guessing the prospect cost is roughly the same as Max Scherzer. Correct me if you think I'm way off on that. But what do you think about those guys and options for the Dodgers?
Yeah, I mean Castillo would be the top guy for me. That's if he's even available. I mean, you mentioned the Reds are 5.5 out of the wild card, 7 out of the division. That's not exactly close. There's obviously still 2 weeks till the deadline here, so I guess that will be pretty telling in how they handle the deadline. If they get a little closer, maybe they're buyers. If they fall a little bit more out, then they become sellers. And then, even if they become sellers, who knows if Castillo's available? Because you mentioned he's still got 2 years of controls left. He's young. I mean, he's 27 or whatever,
28.
and he's 28. He's proven to be, like you said, maybe not a legit ace, but a really good number 2 or an elite number 3.
Yeah.
And when you look at the Dodgers, he'd be their number 3 or number 4, which would just be incredible. And you get him for 2 more years. So that's the guy I definitely would be interested in. You mentioned it's kind of been a tale of two seasons for him. I think I saw somewhere like through his first 10 starts, he
He's
had
bad.
like a 5.1 ERA or something. But then like over his last 10, he's had like a 1.7, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
So he obviously figured something out. He's got his changeup is absolutely filthy. So that would kind of give the Dodgers a different look compared to their other starters. They don't really have. I'd say Gonzalez is kind of the one guy they have who really uses his changeup like as his best off-speed pitch, which is kind of how Castillo is. So I think he'd fit in well in this rotation. It's just kind of a matter of is he available
Yeah.
or not. I think Berrios will be available, but he's 1 year less of control. I'd say he's probably. I'd say Castillo at his best is a little better than Berrios.
Yeah.
Berrios is still good, but I don't think he's a legit ace the way I'd say Castillo is a really good number two, but when he's at his best, he's an ace, which over the last couple months he has been. So I'd go for Castillo over Berrios. But those guys, those are both good options right there when you're talking about, trying to add starting pitching. Those are guys you could put in your rotation right away and feel comfortable that they're going to give you length. They're both durable guys that stay healthy,
Yep.
and those are guys you feel comfortable giving the ball in a postseason game, which who knows, they might be the third or fourth starter in the postseason for the Dodgers. So, yeah, if those guys are available, I think those are two guys the Dodgers should definitely check in on. I think I'm with you that, as far as the package goes, it's probably similar to Scherzer, maybe a little more for
Yeah.
Castillo because you're talking about 2 extra years of control for a 28-year-old pitcher in his prime. So it's probably a little more for that guy. I don't just because the Reds don't have to deal him, like
Yeah.
they could keep him even if they're not competing this year. Like they have hopes of competing next year and the year after that. So yeah, we'll see if those guys are available. But I'd say those are the two top guys not named Max Scherzer right there.
Yeah, and you're probably right. I mean, I don't think Castillo would cost you a second out of your top 9, but it's probably like a 9, one of your top 9, a guy like Andre Jackson, and then maybe Gerardo Carrillo or somebody else that's in sort of that 10 to 20 range where like, hey, probably not a future top 100 prospect, but definitely a guy that would be pitching, in the next few years for most major league rosters. So for you then, I probably would have it. Castillo would be my top choice. Scherzer,
Yeah.
my second choice, and Berrios, my third choice out of those three. Is that how you rank those?
Yeah. That's how I'd have it.
And would
Yeah.
you, I mean, so on just to get a sense on Berrios quickly, like, are you out on Berrios or are you like, hey, I'm comfortable paying market value for Jose Berrios?
Yeah, I'm not out on him by any means. I just prefer
Yeah.
those other guys more. But if those guys aren't available, which it's very likely they might not be, I'd be in on Berrios. Like you said, for market value, he's not a guy I'd overpay for just because you're only getting him for one more year.
Yeah.
He's not exactly elite. He's really good, but I wouldn't call him elite. So I'd pay market value for that, but I'm not overpaying. I'm giving one top 9 guy for that, not two, which
Yeah.
is I think reports indicated like that's kind of what the Twins are looking
Got
for.
it.
So we'll see if they get it. They don't have a whole lot of leverage. I guess you could wait till the off season because you have them for one more year. But the longer you wait, the less you get back. So
Yeah.
for a team who's clearly not competing this year, you're probably going to want to deal that guy before the deadline.
It's interesting looking at Berrios' numbers now. Tell me if you think this comp is fair or unfair. His numbers are very reminiscent of a Julio Urias level pitcher. Do you think that's a fair comp?
Yeah. That's pretty fair, I'd say, yeah.
So just for me, it's helpful to think of like, going and adding a Urias type where I think we both would say, hey, Castillo is a notch above them. Castillo, I wouldn't, probably not on a Bueller level, but he's closer to Bueller than he is to Urias for sure. Okay, so the quantity over quality guys. These are dudes like where if you're just like, hey, you know what? We just want a guy that every 5 days we're going to toss out there and they're going to get us some innings. Maybe not even that many. It might be 5 innings, but they're just going to eat innings and they're just going to get us from here to the end of the season without having to destroy our bullpen every single time. I'll throw a bunch of names at you real quick. The top guy on this list, these are not in order, but just level of interest, I guess, interesting names. Kenta Maeda is on this list. 4.71 ERA. This season, it's not great. His strikeout rate is the lowest since 2017. He's averaging less than 5 innings per start. Does have 2 more years of team control. He's 33. He has that weird contract. StatCast numbers, average to above average. 2020, he was really good. 90th percentile in StatCast. An exit velocity, hard hit, expected numbers, strikeout percentage, walk percentage, whiff rate, etc. So really good in 2020. Not great to bad in 2021. The argument for Maeda, I would say, is familiar with what you're getting. You can pitch him as a starter, but also the added value of when you get to the playoffs, you know that he's a relief weapon. Whether Maeda would want to come back to the Dodgers, knowing his contract situation, I wonder if the Dodgers would need to negotiate some sort of agreement where it's like, hey, we're not going to pay you $3 million and a bunch of incentives. Maybe they up it to like $7 million and get rid of all the incentives, something like that. The next guy on this list, Kyle Gibson. Many people might have him on the list above this. He's 33 years old. He has a 2.29 ERA this year in 17 starts. He's getting you 6 innings per starts. The FIP is 3.47. So that's good. The expected numbers, 77th percentile, 91st percentile in barrels, above average just about everywhere but strikeouts. He is under contract next year for just $7 million. The downside to him is his ERA has been around 5 every year for the past 5 years before this. So kind of whether or not you believe in what you're seeing this year with him. Some other names I'll throw quickly. John Gray, a guy that's been mentioned, 3.68 ERA, 29 years old. The strikeout numbers are not great. The walk numbers are not great. The StatCast numbers are probably better than most of the other guys in this category. Would the Rockies trade with the Dodgers? Probably not. Yusei Kikuchi of the Mariners, ERA under 4. It has been over 5 the last 2 years. The FIP last year was 3. Durable guy by all accounts. Basically, there's a weird club option extension on the table. If they turn that down, which they will almost assuredly do, he would be able to opt into a $13 million player option next year if he wanted. Hard hit numbers below the 20th percentile. Not great. Andrew Haney, the last one, former Dodger legend. Just kidding. The Dodgers traded for him and immediately traded
like an
him.
hour.
Yeah. He is league average. He'll get you 5 innings per start, 5.5 ERA this year. Strikeout numbers, walk numbers a little bit better. StatCast not very good. 30 years old there. So I think you've got a range of options. Maeda, Gibson, Gray, Kikuchi, and Haney. What strikes you about that list of 5? Any of those guys that you'd be interested in? Because I'll say just perfectly honestly, aside from Maeda, I don't know if I would want to trade for any of these guys. I would almost rather just I don't know. Give me Josiah Gray every 5th day, maybe Pepio every once in a while, Andre Jackson. I just don't know how much of an upgrade any of these guys are over the dudes. Even the Edwin Ucedas of the world. As bad as you might think Uceda is, I don't know. Is he that much worse than Andrew Haney? I don't know. So what do you think?
I'm kind of with you there. I'd say Gibson's the one guy who's kind of a needle mover, but like you said, this has kind of been his one good year, and outside of that, he's been average to below average. So and you also have to consider that considering he's having a great year, they're going to want more prospect costs for him, and I don't know if you're going to be willing to give up what it takes for a guy who's having kind of a one-off year, I'd say. So I'd say Gibson's out just for that reason. If I'm going to overpay on prospects, I'm going to go get one of the other guys we talked about, a Castillo or a Scherzer or whatever over a Gibson.
For sure.
So he's out for me. I'm with you on Maeda. I'd be open to it. I just don't know if he'd be cool. It would be the similar situation as why he wanted out. You could be a starter in the regular season, but then in the postseason, we're going to move you to the bullpen. Ideally, that'd be kind of perfect for the Dodgers because even if you look right now, they need starting pitching help. But if you look down the road, if Kershaw gets healthy, they have a postseason rotation of Buehler, Kershaw, Julio, and Gonzalez. That's more than good enough. So ideally, you'd bring in someone who could start right now and then move to the bullpen. Yeah. And in Maeda's case, we've seen he could even be an elite reliever. Yeah. So you're adding a high leverage guy to your bullpen. So I think that would be best case scenario. But who knows if Maeda is in for that? Maybe like you said, maybe they can negotiate the contract so that it's not as start heavy incentive laden the way it is right now.
Let me jump in on Maeda real quick, because the thing that's interesting to me is I wonder if a year and a half spent in Minnesota and basically irrelevance in the major league landscape, it's very easy to be uncomfortable with what the Dodgers are doing for you. And it's I don't want to be a reliever. Well, it's would you rather be that weird starter/reliever hybrid role on a team like the Dodgers that might win the World Series, or just be a starter on a crappy team like the Twins? Because it's kind of those are your two options for the next 3 years. Do you want to compete and possibly have to accept a different role than maybe what you're expecting, or continue down the road that you're on and just stick it out in Minnesota? So I've heard that thrown out, and there's no idea what Maeda would say to that, but I do think it's an interesting data point.
Yeah, that's definitely a fair point. And like you said, at the end of the day, it's a trade, so it's not like he would have to give his approval or anything. He wouldn't necessarily have a choice.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd say out of that bunch, he's definitely the most intriguing. Like you said, Heaney, I think Heaney's a major upgrade over Uceda. I'm not with you on that, but I still don't think that's any sort of needle mover at all. And I don't even remember the fourth
Kikuchi
name.
and Gray were the
Oh,
other two names.
Kikuchi, yeah, not really interested in Kikuchi. John Gray would be interesting, but like you said, who knows if the Rockies want to deal with the Dodgers? He's a free agent at the end of the year.
Yep.
I'm pretty sure. So that would be a rental, whereas so the prospect cost isn't as much. So I'd be interested in John Gray. He's got good stuff. I think a lot of his numbers. I mean, it's the cores factor. He's also dealt with some injuries, but when he's been healthy, he's shown he's got some good stuff. And I think the Dodgers have shown interest in him before. He's kind of the four-seam fastball vertical riser, which we've seen the Dodgers kind of love right now.
Yeah.
That's kind of their thing. So I'd be interested in him. It's just a case of will the Rockies trade with the Dodgers or not.
Totally. Yeah, and let me. I don't think Haney is as good as Edwin Uceda. To me, it's like, is it worth trading prospects in order to get 1 year of the difference between Edwin Uceda and Andrew Haney? And again, we're talking about 10 starts left in the season. Like, Haney is better, and maybe you say maybe the cost is so low. I mean, maybe the cost is Edwin Uceda. If you could trade Edwin Uceda to get Andrew Haney, like, I don't know, that might be interesting to me, depending on what you think of a guy like Uceda or Edwin Jackson or that kind of player. Or excuse me, Andre Jackson, not Edwin Jackson. But yeah. So, anyways, I'll throw one more name at you.
Back Edwin Jackson.
Yeah,
You could give us some innings.
Yeah, I think he's on the U.S. national team, actually. Sneaky good. Okay, this is a guy. Do you have any guesses at who this other? He's on a team of another guy I've already mentioned, and I mean, I don't know. He wasn't even on my radar at all. But do you have any guesses of who this guy's going to be? He's 32 years old.
Is it Marquez from the Rockies?
Nope. AL.
Oh, okay. AL. I'm not sure.
Okay, Alex Cobb of the Angels.
Oh, okay, yeah.
32 years
He's
old.
having a solid year.
3.96 ERA. His FIP is actually 2.66. Striking out 10 guys per 9, 3 walks per 9. His exit velocity, league average, expected numbers, a tick higher. 94th percentile barrel, 65th percentile strikeout percentage. Sort of a sinker splitter guy about 80% of the time. Mixes in a curveball, low 90s. Not a ton of innings, get you about 5 innings, but he's an interesting one. I mean, nobody's talking about him. I can't imagine the prospect cost would be high, even though he is having a good season this year. But Alex Cobb, when I dug in beneath the numbers, I said, hey, you know what? 32 years old, 1 year rental. I like him better than every other guy in the category I just mentioned. Maybe I would take Maeda just because I like Maeda as a person and I like the familiarity. But if you're not going to get, if you're going to get just like an innings eater, Cobb is the guy that I think I like the most.
Yeah, that's fair. I've looked at Cobb's numbers too, and you just laid them out. They're actually not bad. You're like you see him, and you're like, wait, like what?
Yeah.
Like actually, I will say I haven't really watched him pitch at all, so I don't really know, what exactly they'd be getting outside of the numbers. But like you said, he'd be a solid guy to eat innings. I don't think he'd be in the postseason rotation. So it's more just kind of to go out and win the division more so than like a World Series type move. But the prospect cost would be low. You mentioned he's a rental, so it would just be for this year. You're definitely not giving up any of your top 10 guys. Probably not even a top 20 guy for someone like Cobb. So I mean, if they could get him for cheap, absolutely. I mean, I'd say another option who we talked about on our live show. I'm not sure if this guy's in your next category, but Cole Hamels we talked about is another guy that you're basically getting for nothing that could come in and potentially eat some innings. So those guys are kind of the same, where like they're going to help in the regular season, especially now when you're down 1 or 2 starters, but I wouldn't exactly count on those guys to start in the postseason, which is fine though, because if the Dodgers are healthy, they're pretty much set there anyways.
Hamels, I'm glad you brought up Hamels. He wasn't on my list. I had spaced that. Hamels is the perfect example of who I would rather take over all of the guys in the category I just mentioned. Again, aside from maybe Cobb and Maeda. Like, he is the perfect example of he can't be that much worse than Andrew Haney, if not better. And the cost is just money. There's no prospects involved. So he's and obviously this is all speculation on how good he looked at his showcase, etc. So I'm glad you brought up Hamels. I think they said he was sitting in the low 90s, whatnot. So who knows? I just texted our friend Ron Gutterman, who writes for the Angels website, asking for a scouting report on Alex Cobb. So we'll see if he texts me back before the end of the show. But let's move on to relievers. Okay, so there's 2 categories here. I've broken it down to go win a World Series category and then sort of the quality over quantity category. I don't think the Dodgers are going to make a move for a seventh inning guy. I think they have a bunch of dudes they could throw into that role, especially once the postseason comes off. I might be wrong, but just for the sake of time, we'll limit it to this. So the go win in World Series category is very, very short, very, very simple. It's Craig Kimbrell. 0.53 ERA this year. This is a guy who was struggled with injuries, missed a lot of time the last 2 years. The ERA was not pretty. Historically durable, though, historically elite, has been in big playoff moments. He's also under contract for next year, due $16 million. That's a big number, but that's about probably market value for a guy like that and only on a one-year deal. Are you ready for my crazy trade proposal? I'm going to throw it to you right now. Are you ready for this, Daniel? It involves Craig Kimbrell. Okay, so it's with the Chicago Cubs. It's Craig Kimbrell. It's Kyle Hendricks. And it's Chris Bryant, all going to the Dodgers. All going to the Dodgers in exchange for Gavin Lux. What do you say to that trade proposal?
All three of those?
All three of those guys for Gavin Lux. Bryant, a free agent at the end of the year. Kimbrell this year plus one next year. Hendricks, I can't remember if he's under team control or not beyond this year. But that's my psychotic trade proposal that I'm throwing at you, and I want to know what your immediate reaction is. I'm going to look up Kyle Hendricks' contract.
I mean, I think you have to do it just because you're getting three guys that can help you win a World Series now. Like, if you win one World Series because of those guys, like, it's worth losing Lux, who could still turn into a star. I'd say we're a lot less optimistic now than we were at the beginning of the year. We've kind of watched him play all year. He flashes potential every now and then, but I'd say for the most part, he's been pretty disappointing this year. There's still uncertainty about Corey Seager coming back, Chris Taylor coming back. So ideally, you'd like to have Lux just kind of as insurance if you lose either or both of those guys. But to me, it's worth it if you just win one World Series. And there's no doubting that adding those three Cubs players, gives you a better chance to win the World Series this year. You're adding probably the best position player available in Chris Bryant. Who also has some versatility, so you can move him around. I'm not exactly sure where he'd fit in. He'd probably play a lot of left field, but also A.J. Pollock has also been great. Maybe if Cody Bellinger doesn't start hitting, Bryant takes some of his time. You're obviously losing Gavin Lux, so that means that Chris Taylor's more or less your everyday second baseman to finish out the year. You're adding Hendricks to your rotation, which we just talked at length about the rotation. That's not a bad guy to add right there, and he's under control for past this year. I'm not exactly sure how many.
So it's actually 3 more years. So you'd probably need to throw in a piece, include like maybe an Andre Jackson type or something, because he's due about $14-15 million a year for the next 3 years beyond this one.
Which that's not like anything crazy. Nope. Like that's not cheap, but that's also for what you're getting from him, like a solid number 2, number 3 type starter. That's not bad at all. 3 years, $45 million or whatever.
And his stuff's not going to diminish over time. I mean, his stuff has already diminished. So
he doesn't have to worry about velocity and such. And then you're getting Kimbrell, who would be, the best reliever in this bullpen. So yeah, I definitely think that's something you have to consider. It would be tough seeing Lux go just because I feel like they've held on to him when there's been other deals on the table. I still think the organization overall is high on him, but at a certain point, you kind of have to say, hey, this is a golden opportunity to go win a World Series this year. And then you also have 2 of the guys past this year, so that'll help in the future as well. So I definitely think you have to consider that.
Yeah. Okay. How did that live up to the hype of a crazy trade proposal that I had for you?
Yeah, I'd say. I mean, I thought it was for Chris Bryant. Like, you wouldn't tell me who it was. I was thinking Chris Bryant, but I definitely wasn't expecting all 3 Cubs guys.
It is interesting how many guys that I'm going to even mention are on teams of guys we've already talked about as well. I did ask Justin Lorber the same thing. He says he doesn't see that trade happening. He thinks that the Dodgers are probably still really high on Lux, and that they're not going to want to sell low on him. I'm not sure that would be selling low. Obviously, with Hendricks 3 years of team control, it's interesting. But, I mean, I don't know. It's a fascinating trade. So, Kimbrell, would you be willing to give up, let's say it costs you, maybe one of those top 9 guys just straight up for Craig Kimbrell? Like, are you interested in that?
I might do Cartaya just because, like we talked about, the catching depth that's there. I typically, usually I'm on the other side when it comes to relievers. I say don't give up the top prospects for a reliever. Those guys are volatile. Like, as good as Kimbrell's been this year.
Yeah.
You could look back to just last year and the year before that and see how bad he
Yeah.
was. So you never know which guy you're gonna get. Um, but I will say, like, there is a bit of a need for a back end reliever just because Kenley is a free agent this offseason.
Yep.
And the way he's been pitching, he's going to want another big time deal. It's probably his last opportunity to get a big contract like that. And I don't know, just because of all his ups and downs, I don't see the Dodgers giving him that deal. So he's probably walking. So it would allow Kimbrel to kind of just step in right there and
Yeah.
become the closer. You get him for one more year at 15 million, which that's a lot of money, but it's not over the top. Like, oh my God, like that's so much.
Yeah.
It's reasonable. So, I'd maybe give up Cartaya, but I'm not exactly.
Yeah.
The thing with Kimbrel is there's going to be a lot of teams interested in
Yeah.
him. Like there's so many teams out there that could use bullpen help. He's going to be the best one available. So I'm not going to get into a bidding war and start upping my offer for Kimbrel. But if Cartaya and like a lower end or one or two lower end guys gets it done, then I'd consider that for sure.
Yeah, that seems like the type where, I mean, and this is where the Dodgers typically get no's from other teams, but you say, hey, maybe we'll package you 3 of the 10 to 25 range guys rather than one of our top 100 level guys. I did get a response back from Ron, scouting report on Alex Cobb. Ground ball pitcher, struggled early in the year because the Angels defense has been terrible, has been awesome his last few starts. He mentions his FIP is 2.66 compared to the ERA of 3.98. So sounds like Ron likes him. So there you go. Alex Cobb, my sleeper target for the Dodgers. I got 4 relievers in my quality over quantity. We'll do this quickly. Rysel Iglesias, another Angels player here. Everything on this guy is elite when you look at StatCast. 96th percentile in on-base average, expected ERA, expected batting average, strikeout, whiff, chase, 93rd percentile in walk, exit velocity, 86th, hard hit, 72nd. Has been really good in 2019 and 2020 as well. ERA 3.40, so not as elite as you would expect based on all the numbers. FIP right around the same place. 2.74 ERA last year. 96 mile an hour fastball would be a rental. As we said, Angels almost surely going to be, well, I shouldn't say that. I don't know. We don't know what the Angels are going to do, but he's option 1. Taylor Rogers, another guy here, 95th percentile when you look at expected numbers, strikeout percentage, that kind of thing. 91st percentile in walk. Exit velocity, league average. Just turned 30, one more year of arbitration. He's a 3.5 ERA, left-handed pitcher. 2.23 FIP, though. FIP has been under 3 for the last 4 years. Strikeout rate over 11. Walk rate under 2. Fastball touching 95.5. He pitches for the Twins, so yet another Twin. Maybe you want to package a Berrios or Maeda kind of deal. Richard Rodriguez, he's a guy I've mentioned that I like. Just turned 31, 2 more years of arbitration. 99th percentile walk rate, 91st percentile expected on base and expected average. 2.65 ERA, a FIP right in line. 2.7 ERA, 2.85 FIP last year. Career strikeout percentage, just under 10. Strikeouts per 9 are down, but he's walking less than 1 guy per 9 innings. 93 mile an hour fastball. Another guy I've mentioned before, Kendall Graveman. ERA under 1. The FIP is up around 3. 96 mile an hour fastball. Less than 9 strikeouts, but does have a low walk rate. No track record of doing this. First season strictly as a reliever. He is a free agent at the end of the year for Seattle. So Iglesias, Rogers, Rodriguez, Graveman, if you want to say we're not going for top of the market, but high-end guys that the cost is still going to be pretty significant, varying degrees of control. What do you think about that list?
Yeah, I think all of those guys would be solid options. They are all guys who you could use in high leverage. The more high leverage options you have, the better, because, when you look to the postseason, you never know what's going to happen. There's shorter leashes on starters. So just the more quality arms you have, the better. The Dodgers have a lot of them now, but adding one more to that mix wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. I'd say maybe Rogers is the one lefty of that bunch. I'd say the Dodgers are kind of short on left-handed, relieving high leverage type options. Victor Gonzalez, he actually just got activated today, so we'll see how he looks if he pitches tonight or this week. But he hadn't been great before he went on the IL. And then when you look past him, like maybe David Price moves back there. Scott Alexander, Garrett Clevenger.
If you're an Alex Vesia believer and what you've seen from him since he's come up,
like those guys are all options, but I don't know if you feel comfortable with any of them in high leverage. So I think you might need to add one more lefty to the mix there. But yeah, I mean, I think the thing with all those guys is you're not giving up the high end prospects, which is a good thing, and you're still getting a guy that could come in and contribute. Probably not a guy who's going to be saving games, or like a Kimbrel who would be the best guy available, but there's still quality options, and the more you have, the better, I'd say. So, yeah.
Well, let me close this segment by asking you this. I threw a bunch of categories at you. You've got the World Series starting pitcher, the World Series reliever. You've got the high-quality starters, the high-quality relievers. Then you've got the innings eater starting pitchers. If you had to rank those 5, like if you were saying, hey, Daniel, you can make one trade and you're going to pay market value, which of those would you prefer to pay market value? My sense is, and I think I'm in the same place, is the quality over quantity starting pitcher, Berrios, Castillo type, I think is where I would fall. Probably first. I think I'd go the quality over quantity relief pitcher, number 2. And then from there, I don't know. I'm not that interested in the innings eater guy, so I think that's probably 5th on my list. But I think I would go quality over quantity, Berrios, Castillo type starter, and then, an Iglesias or a Rogers, Rodriguez, one of those 3 guys as a reliever would be my top 2 preferences of go out and make the move. And that's maybe where I would draw the line and say, I think the Dodgers should go make these 2 moves. Where do you stand, and where do you have the line of they should do this?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm with you there. I'd go for the starters, the Castillo, Berrios, and Scherzer. If you could get one of those guys, that's a true needle mover right there.
Yeah.
Those are guys who are top of the rotation type starters. Like, if I'm giving up a top prospect, that's kind of what I'm looking for. Like, I'm not, and I think the Dodgers kind of fall in line with this thinking as well, just based on what they've done in the past. Like, we haven't really seen them go out and acquire that big time reliever. Just because of what I already talked about with the volatility, with you just never know what you're going to get from those guys. So I think we've seen Andrew Friedman more willing to give up the big time prospects for either a position player or a starting pitcher. We've talked about how they don't really need a position player right now. So I think if you're going to make a big move, it would be for a starter. And those guys, I mean, Berrios is controllable for 1 more year after this, Castillo for 2, Scherzer, there's extension talks there. Yeah. Who knows? But those are all guys that could potentially contribute past this season. So if you're going to give up the high-end prospect, I'd rather it be for that. And I'm with you on the relievers, like that last group we mentioned. Those are all guys that could come in and contribute and be part of a bullpen, but they're not the elite of the elite Kimbrels, where it's going to take the same type of package that it'll take for a starter to get a reliever who doesn't pitch as much. So I'd be willing to give up less to get one of those last 4 guys. But I'd say I'm probably out on Kimbrel, if it's going to take one of the top 5 to 10 prospects to get him.
Totally. Well, there you go. There's the trade preview primer. We're going to have way more trade talk, obviously, the next couple of weeks. I was texting with Justin Lorber. We're going to have him on at some point to talk prospects and who he likes and building some packages and that kind of thing. So stay tuned for that. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to sign off for now. We're going to do a Giants preview, but we're just going to pull it out and put it in its own video here ahead of this one, since we're already at an hour here. So we appreciate you all watching. We appreciate you all joining us. Daniel and I will be back with a live show later in the week. I don't think we'll be able to do it for this Giants series, but we'll see what the schedule looks like. Maybe the Thursday night game, TBD. So stay tuned for that. But we appreciate you joining us as always. That's Daniel Starkand. I'm Jeff Spiegel. Make sure you check out DodgerBlue.com for all the latest Dodger Blue 1958 on YouTube. Has all the pre-game interviews, post-game interviews, that kind of thing. So good stuff there. So that's Daniel. I'm Jeff. We appreciate you. Dodgers and Giants tonight. Look for our preview in a separate video, and we'll see you soon.
The best team holding a trophy high in the air. The Los Angeles Dodgers, champions of the baseball world.